This is IA Forward, your playbook for success as an independent insurance agent. Here to help you knock it out of the ballpark are your hosts, Shane Tatum and Tonya Lead.
Welcome to IA Forward, and welcome to the real hurricane season.
It's always crazy when I hear like June 1st, the beginning of hurricane season.
Labor Day weekend is the beginning of hurricane season. Take it from the girl who has lived in the deep South on the Gulf Coast all of her life. Hurricane season starts end of August.
What was Katrina? Wasn't that August?
Yes, that was the end of August. Because the reason I remember that is it was Labor Day weekend. I was out of town for the weekend and then actually had people that came and lived with me and moved in from the coast while I wasn't there.
Yeah, this idea that it's June 1st, like I get it. I get the whole, like, let's make it about 6 months long. But it's not. It's 3 months long, maybe 2.5, maybe 6 weeks. The core of hurricane season is, let's just call it middle of August to first week or two in October. Warm waters are the warmest. It is a very short, devastating type of season. And it's not 6 months long, even though that's the formal thing. But we are dead in the middle of it. You've got two Gulf Coast people here, born and raised in Texas, born and raised in Louisiana. I'm not insensitive to the destruction and everything. Matter of fact, that's what brought us to this topic today.
And our prayers go out to everyone that was recently affected. When I see the devastation and the posts from my friends that have been affected by this, it is absolutely heartbreaking. As someone who has lived through this before, I know the devastation, and please don't think that we take this lightly when we are having this conversation, and know that we have such a level of sympathy and empathy with you.
Yeah, we've been through it, okay? Rita was terrible for me in East Texas, and Ike was terrible several years ago as well. We've been through it. We've been there. We're talking about it because we've grown up with it our entire lives. We've been in the middle of it. And for some, in some parts that have been affected by the flooding and by the incredible amount of rain, you're not used to hurricane season. It's not something that really has historically affected Tennessee. And so I'm probably going to come across a little bit like it's just a normal day, but that's not what I'm trying to do here. And I want to say that up front because some of the things that I want to talk about, it's about the devastation and economic loss. It's about the loss of property from an insurance standpoint. Obviously, the loss of life is incredibly heartbreaking and just crazy to deal with. But insured losses from the private insurance market, those are different things. And that's one of the things that we want to talk about is how to deal with this as an agency owner for your frontline staff, how to help them deal with this when you're seeing things like Ian in Florida a couple of years ago. I saw something like over $100 billion. It was a big number. It wasn't a $100 billion insurance event. That's something that I want to make sure that people understand. There's a difference between insured losses and maybe total losses or actual property damage and physical damage losses, because flooding, which is a huge deal that doesn't get its limelight, surge is the big deal. Wind steals the show, but it's really water, rising water, the pure definition of flood that does the most damage.
Speaking of Hurricane Ian, 60 Minutes did an episode recently that cast some shadows on the insurance industry and really made us as a whole look like terrible, awful, very bad people.
Yep, it did. The reality of it is that there are bad people. There are bad actors in any industry. Media is going to grab this. This is what media does, is media is going to grab something and they're going to run with it. If this is true, if investigation and full investigations findings come out that this 60-minute report is truly accurate, then somebody needs to be prosecuted. It's terrible for the industry. It's terrible for those individuals, for the insureds. It just should not happen. If an insurance company is taking a workflow process and making it difficult for their customers to file claims, to be made whole based on the premiums, based on the insurance contract that they agreed to. If things are being done at any level, from agent to carrier to adjusters to construction. If that's happening, then shame on them, and people need to have consequences for that. It made me immediately go to the John Grisham book and movie starring Matt Damon called The Rainmaker, where this was literally a life insurance company, that a health and accident insurance company that was preying on the lower income demographic. And they literally had a process. But in that case, this particular insurance company needed to be made to look terrible because they were terrible. If that's what we end up with, then I go back to my conversation with the Department of Insurance attorney several years ago. That was an aha moment for me in my career, where she said, our job and our goal is to get the bad people off the street. And if there are bad people in this process, then we need to hold them accountable. There need to be consequences, and we need to get them out of the industry. And my heart goes out to a customer who would be dealing with that. That's one view. The other view is this exaggerated? Is there a contractual policy language situation that's changing the adjustment? Did this adjuster that's noted, we don't know them, we don't know anything about this, we just know the 60-minute story and subsequent articles that have come out about it talk about. What we don't know is the results of investigations yet, okay? So I am very careful to jump on sides here, other than to say, if this truly happened, people need to be held accountable.
We know that the Florida insurance market is risky. The storms that we have had here in the last decade that have been so costly to insurance companies have been off the charts. And most of our national carriers have exited the state. There have been our smaller regional carriers that have stepped in, but we've lost like 9 or 10 of those in the last several years. It's a tough place to be. And when you see things like the 60-minute episode come after what's going on or what's allegedly going on in Florida, what does that make carriers want to do?
Well, obviously, it makes them gun shy. Obviously, that's the reality. What's really interesting, though, and this is one of those things that's going to sound like one of these normalizing hurricanes in Florida, it's just a way of life. And my comparison to that is one of my daughter's college roommate is from Topeka, Kansas, at the University of Kansas. And I would text them, hey, the concerned dad, of course, hey, tornado watch. Hey, you're under a tornado watch. Where are y'all? Are you in the basement? And finally, the funny Miss Campbell Bagshaw says, Shane, I grew up under a tornado watch. Leave it alone. We're fine. Unless the siren goes off, we're going about our day. That's the way hurricanes and Floridians, it is what it is. You live it. You talk to people like, hey, can we just move you guys to some other part of the country? And they're going to beat you down. Absolutely not. I'm staying here. This is my home. I get it. We feel the same way in Texas. What's really interesting is all along and up and down Florida, things are not the same. Certain parts of Florida don't get hit that often. Other parts of Florida get hit all the time. And construction is different in different parts of Florida. Now, that doesn't mean it's not the same maybe for new construction, but you've got a lot of buildings, a lot of homes that have escaped damage in previous hurricanes who have not had to update their code. And so there will continue to be some destruction. What's really interesting, though, is back to this sort of disaster view of damage and then insurable losses. I want to come back to that because that is different between the media and the actual insurance company risk side of things. We have this little thing called FEMA that now oversees the National Flood Insurance Program, and most of the losses from a hurricane, most, continue to be surge, which is flood, and flooding, in-state flooding, or Western North Carolina, devastated flooding. It's not going to be wind losses, which means it's not going to be a private insurable loss. But your customer base as an insurance agency isn't necessarily understanding that. All they're seeing is wow, look at these pictures, look at these videos, look at all this. And most of these losses, when we get to the end of it, whatever it's going to be, 100+ billion, we're seeing 3 to 5 billion in the early reports on insurable losses. Now, just think about that for a minute. Only 3 to 5% of the losses are going to actually hit the private insurance market, the homeowners market, the commercial property marketplace. What makes insurance industry watchers mad, especially the consumer advocates group, is you'll see these reports come out and say, home insurance companies weathering the storm well, expected insurable losses only 3 to 5 billion. That doesn't feel good. That does not sound good. But our actuarial partners who sell us data, who are there to help us understand and mitigate future risk, they got to get out there within 24 to 36 hours with some kind of message, and they've got to go out into the trade journals and they've got to say, insurance companies are going to fare well, only $3 to $5 billion worth of losses projected. If I'm a consumer, specifically, if I've lost loved ones, if I've lost everything, if I am stuck in Asheville, North Carolina because I can't get out because all the bridges and roads have been washed away, the last thing I want to hear is only $3 to $5 billion worth of damage. And that is the challenge. This is why we make our money, agency owners. This is why we're not going to be replaced, and why I am so bullish on the independent agency system is because we get to bring a different message. We get to bring an education opportunity to the table. We get to be something different here than what's going to happen between this tug of war between the industry's tone or the industry's cycle and the media economic losses.
And the FEMA process is incredibly interesting. In previous podcasts, you've heard me talk about Aunt Mitzi. And Aunt Mitzi is actually a FEMA disaster adjuster. And so she's one of the people that goes in and looks at people's homes, has the conversations, finds the people when they're not in their homes because their homes have been destroyed, talking with her and learning from her about what they do and how they have to do it, and the assumptions that they have to make because of privacy laws, I can't even fathom. And especially after working in the insurance industry with Integra for the last 7 years, our rules and their rules don't even resemble the same thing. So when we look at those dollar figures on losses, they are so skewed from what they would be if FEMA was run like a business.
I have this visual that I'll never get out of my head now. I've never met Aunt Mitzi, but I have a visual of Aunt Mitzi that I've made up in my head. And that visual now includes her in a Ford F-250 diesel with like the 10 gas tanks in the back of the truck and going into any kind of place that normal vehicles are not supposed to go after a disaster. So you've helped me develop a bigger picture of what Aunt Mitzi's world looks like, just to add to the lore of Aunt Mitzi. But yes, think about how hard insurance adjusting is. Insurance adjusting is hard. Let me say that to our adjuster friends and our agent friends. You need to understand insurance adjusting is hard because you're dealing with lots of different things. You're dealing with people who have gone through something traumatic in so many cases, and you're trying to make them whole. You're trying to comply with an insurance contract. And now, in Aunt Mitzi's defense and her fellow FEMA adjuster counterparts, we've added a government layer to it. Can you imagine just painting that picture for a minute, how difficult that could possibly be? It's very difficult. It's very hard. Just like the scene from Moneyball, it's hard. It's very hard.
So what can we as independent agency owners do change the dialogue when it comes to events like this?
I'm going to start with what we shouldn't do. I don't think we should spin it. I don't think we should try to create a perception looking good or whatever. thinking about the Ian storm and the adjustment being changed and the insurance company maybe being a bad actor, bad faith. First, we start with authenticity and we call that out. We get the bad guys off the street. We support the fact that wrong is wrong. And if that turns out to be true, from there, we have to be able to empathize with what's going on. And look, it's really hard to empathize if you've never been through it. When you go through something, you get a different sense. If you have never lost a parent, it's very difficult to empathize with someone who has. There's just lots of things that I've learned over the course of my life that it's very difficult if you haven't been through it. Going through things side by side, shoulder to shoulder with our customers and being able to either empathize because you've been through it or empathize because you're going through it. And understanding that when we get down to this type of event, these type of days where there's a natural disaster, where there's a catastrophic event, then everything else goes on the shelf and we got to get down in it and we have to have direct conversations as much as we can. We need to be out in the middle of it. That's the thing that comes to mind when we had the great freeze in 2021, just talking to our agents, listening to our customers, not being quick to transfer the call to the claims phone number. I understand you can get overwhelmed in these situations, and that's understandable. I'm not saying that. But even if you can catch 10% of the phone calls and all hands on deck, put people in place to just listen. Think about this in terms of the loss of a loved one or the loss of a family member. A lot of times there's nothing to say, but you just showing up is the key. And just the fact that you're there, it says a lot. And what happens is we try to put out statements, which is fine. We can put out statements, but put out short communications that are authentic. Do not put out these super polished, wordsmithed things. Obviously, make sure you're not saying anything offensive.
Don't stick it in Chat GPT and make it not real.
Don't. Make it real to you and your community. Make it about who you are and be prepared in a way. Preparedness, if those in the storm's path could back up 2 or 3 weeks and be a little more prepared as far as our insurance agency peers out there, they probably wish they could. They probably would prefer to back up and be a little more prepared. Those that have not been affected, the time to prepare is now, even if it doesn't happen to you for several years down the road. I really think authenticity matters enormously here because it's the empathy part, and you can't fake that. You can try to fake it, but you're going to get demolished. You're going to get called out if you're trying to fake your way through that. I just go back to it's hard unless you've been through it. Until you've gotten up at 4 a.m. in the morning to drive 20 miles because you heard a gas pump had gas tanks because you needed to get some things for your family's car. That's part of my Rita story is waking up at 4 a.m. to go to a neighboring town to get some gas for the vehicles because we were out of gas for 7 to 8 days. We were out of bread. We were out of eggs. We were out of basic essentials. Electricity was out. It was a lot. And oh, by the way, half of the southeastern Texas coast had evacuated and gotten stuck in Angelina County, Texas, because they ran out of gas and we didn't have any gas. Aha moments in your life. And I can't empathize with someone if I hadn't have gone through with that, if I hadn't have been in the middle of that. But now I get it. And now I know. I'm not a panic guy, but I am aware that when things like this happen, when it happens in your community, you got to get shoulder to shoulder. You're going through it with them, and you got to be that voice of reason.
I want to grab a hold of that voice of reason part. Please be very careful about sharing photographs of the destruction. These are people's homes. These are people's businesses. And it doesn't necessarily do anything but create more stress when you do that. On top of that, there are so many AI created photos that make the devastation look even worse than it is. So I do want to encourage you, whatever you're posting to your socials, whatever you're sharing, make sure that it is authentic to you And it's not that you're sharing other people's challenges, because it could be that what you're doing is making it worse for them. I can remember right after Katrina and sitting in front of my TV, and I actually had a friend see the foundation of her townhome. They kept showing it over and over again on the news channels. And every time she had to see the foundation of her home, it caused more problems. It caused more mental anguish. So I would encourage you, if you choose to post about disasters like this, make it authentic from you and not necessarily showing what's happening specifically with other people.
Yeah. Yes, it does. It goes down this path of fight or flight kind of mindset is what's coming into my brain here. So many people grab their phones and start recording instead of stepping in to help. So I'm probably not going to write the novel that I have in my brain that has the insurance agent, risk manager, superhero plot to it. A Jason Bourne meets, Flow or something like that. But I do think it could be an interesting little idea. But what is going on in society is that instead of helping, we're after viral sensations. We are a network, an independent agency. We are everywhere. The independent agency channel is scattered across every community in this country. When things happen, we should be there. We should be in the middle of it. Even though we're not adjusters, even though we're salespeople, the perception of our customers is that we are the advisor, or at least we're trying to position ourselves as the risk manager, risk consultant, advisor. And it has to be a fight, not a flight. We have to step into the fire. We have to step forward. We can't be the one grabbing our phone, like video and sharing on social media to get some more, brand awareness. It needs to go into more personal, which is easy for us. It's one of our core values, make it personal. We have to do that as an industry. That's how we counter the bad actors, the situation with customers and their claims not being adjusted well or properly. It helps us in every case when we just get in there and we help. More good's going to come out of that in a brand build than something that is just a opportunistic thing. That's a big part of it. And it's really hard for us to get our head around today because we fight that social media craze. We fight that clickbait kind of environment and social media scenarios. We have to fight that. That's part of that authenticity approach that we need to be taking.
I'm going to leave us today with this quote from the late baseball great Pete Rose. It's easy to practice something that you're good at, and that's what most people do. What's tough is to go out and to work hard on the things that you don't do very well.
Attitude's a choice. Make a great one.
Bye, y'all.
At the Integra Partner Network, we understand that carrier access is the key to your agency's success. That's why Integra offers direct access to top-rated personal and commercial carriers, ensuring your agency thrives in today's challenging market. And with our comprehensive resources, profit sharing and bonus opportunities, technology and peer support, all while you retain 100% of your book with no penalties to exit. Integra is ready to empower you and your agency to find sustained growth. Find your way to Integra. Visit IntegraPartnerNetwork.com today. That's IntegraPartnerNetwork.com.